Okay, so yeah, let's get started here. Thanks for everybody joining us today on our very important release of our report, Citizens for Privacy, How the War on Sex Work is Stripping Your Privacy Rights. My name is Maxine Dugan, and I am the president of the Erotic Service Providers Legal Education and Research Project. I am, an erotic service provider. An erotic service provider is anybody who earns their living through their erotic labor. So you can be an adult film performer, online content creator, adult online text or chat, exotic dancer. You can be a professional dominatrix or submissive. And I myself work as a prostitute of 30 plus years, and I pretty much plan on working as a prostitute for another 30 plus more. The Erotic Service Providers Legal Education and Research Project is a nonprofit that seeks to expand the sexual privacy rights for everybody. And today we are talking about our report where we did public records request with the sponsorship from the Rose Foundation. We asked 58 district attorneys and sheriff departments and 38 probation departments and 52 police departments in California if they had made prostitution arrests, which are known as Criminal Code 647B, or the loitering with intent to commit prostitution, which is called the 65322, anytime between the period of January 1st, 2020 through February 28th, 2022. So this report reflects the responses from those agencies. Now, noting that many of those agencies did not respond, because under the California Public Records Act, agencies can respond with a basic acknowledgement that they responded to you, but not provided you actually any records. So some of the records we specifically asked for is if they did these prostitution arrests for 647B and 65322, and more importantly, what is the technology they used to make those arrests. So that's the focus of what we're going to be talking about today, is the technology that the police departments are using to violate our privacy. And we have an esteemed panelist here today who many of which worked on the report directly with us, and some of whom have been championing for sex worker rights for a long time. So I just want to say a couple more things about the public records request process a little bit. We don't have a number of actual arrests. We do have a number of actual arrests for 647B and the 65322, the solicitation of prostitution and the loitering with intent to commit prostitution. But because the police responses who actually responded with those actual cases, they often conflated those two different things together. So I can't tell you how many were for 647B for solicitation and how many for loitering, because the police didn't actually tell us. Some of the other problems with the public records requests were that like the Santa Barbara Sheriff's Department responded that they were denying our request for the technology used and the citations for those arrests, because they said it would reveal the identities of human trafficking victims or sex trafficking victims, which was odd because we didn't ask anything about sex trafficking. We didn't ask anything about people's identities. We were denied access to records because some agencies said things like, oh, well, it'll reveal people's identities. And then we had other agencies that responded and provided everybody's identities who had been arrested for prostitution. And then we had other agencies who responded without any I would say any official capacity, like they didn't have their emblem of their agency listed at the top of their response. So it was often confusing about who was actually responding to these public records requests. There were situations where the public records request had no name of any individual who was attached to those public records requests. So there was just a lot of sloppiness, and it seemed confusion on the part of the public records response. I got a lot of phone calls from public records request people inside these agencies who were responsible for responding, and they wanted to know if I was a real person, what kind of agency was the Erotic Service Providers Legal Education and Research Project, you know, what were we doing with this information? And none of that information is really germane to their responsibility to respond to the public records request. I had a lot of positive interactions with many of the public records request people in clarifying what it is I was looking for. And I didn't have to give a reason why I was looking for it. It's just part of what the public gets to know. So some of the public records request people had to go back and forth to the police officers who are doing the actual arrest for prostitution to get clarification on the technology they were using to make these arrests, after I would have to explain to the public records request person how prostitution arrests actually occurred. So they had a better idea about specifically what to ask of the police officers, because the police officers were not really forthcoming with the information that I had requested that the public records request person was actually responsible for. So there was a lot of that type of confusion that went on, and I have many other examples to give, and some are included in the report. The report is on our website, and we'll be able to go on to have our illustrious a research analysis person, Tara Burns, talk about some of the key findings. Take it away, Tara.
I'm Tara. This was a really exciting project. I kind of came onto this project after Maxine and the rest of the team had been doing records requests for well over a year, and there were thousands and thousands of pages of invoices and receipts for technology equipment from police departments, citations for prostitution arrests and citations, manuals for different kinds of technology, and all of these training documents, which were quite educational. So I kind of took all of those thousands and thousands of pages, and with my research assistant, Allie, we made it make sense. And so first of all, we were kind of just trying to figure out what is going on with all of this technology. I'm a person who's like, I've always thought I was really paranoid, and probably most of the things that I thought were happening were not really happening. It's actually all happening. So there are these databases, and so there's databases that are specifically aimed at sex workers. A couple of them, one is called Spotlight, which is owned by Thorn, and one is Traffic Jam, which is owned by Marinus Technology. Both of these are promoted as like rescuing the trafficking victims, right? Like these are databases, they're going to help the police find like that 12-year-old girl who was kidnapped at the Super Bowl, who we know doesn't probably really exist. But they're using the facial recognition technology. They're crawling, they have web bots that are crawling all of the prostitution advertising websites on the internet. We don't know which ones. And creating copies of all of the ads every hour, some of them every half hour. And then they build out biometric profiles of sex work advertisers, and they use facial recognition technology, and they also cross-reference with like phone numbers and email addresses and stuff like that to connect those to people's social media profiles, people's if they've been, you know, had an ad on Craigslist to sell a couch, and in some cases even their driver's license photos maybe, or mugshots. So there's been a thing that's been going on that's been happening with 2 sex workers for the last, I started really hearing about it in 2016, 2017, where sex workers are trying to come into the US or leaving the US going into another country, and they get stopped at the border, and the customs officials have their prostitution ads printed out, and they say, this is an ad that you posted on Eros a year ago. You're a prostitute, you're not coming in to our country. And we thought, back then, there was a lot of speculation about how is this happening, and we thought, well, one of these websites must be, they look at our IDs to verify our age. They must be selling our information to the government. No, it's these databases. And so they can use these databases. It's not just in Border Patrol. So I'm getting a couple text messages from a couple different people that are having a hard time getting into here, that it's asking them for a passcode. I don't know if somebody can try to help them. But so, these are databases that police can access when they pull you over for a traffic stop and see if you're a sex worker. This can subject people to all kinds of harassment and discrimination in different circumstances where they are dealing with police officers. But these databases are not just for sex workers. There are other databases like Clear, TLO, XP, Accurant, CopLink, right, that are crawling the whole internet and building out these profiles. And some of these databases, they're not just crawling the internet. It's not just information that's publicly available on the internet, right? Like they're taking all of this information. They're also, have your credit report, your property taxes, what you own, all of this information that actually police might have to go and get a warrant if they wanted to get that information about you, if they wanted to go and request it from a company and compel a company to provide them with that kind of information about you. But because they're subscribed to this database, and the database is buying that information about everybody, they're able to just access that information. There's these license plate reader network situations where they are, they have cameras that they can just stick them up on a pole anywhere, but they're also on all the police cars. And when they recognize a license plate, they take a picture and they put that in a database with the GPS location and the license plate number and the type of car and color of car and everything, right? So police, and not just police, this is kind of something that caters to the repossession industry, vehicle repo. So they can look up your license plate number and they might find just pictures of you and whoever else was in your car with you driving at such and such times. We're really being watched all the time. It's crazy. There were also receipts and records for phone ripping software. So for example, there's one called Celebrate, where police can just take your phone and they can say to you, well, do you want me to just take your phone and I can just plug it into my machine here and search it? Or I'm going to have to take your phone and hang on to it, and you won't be able to have your phone until I get a warrant to allow me to search it. Well, or they say, I'm going to have to arrest you if you don't give me the phone, because they are allowed to search your phone in some cases when they arrest you, but not when they don't arrest you. So, and then there's slides that instruct in the training that instruct the police on kind of the cost benefit analysis of whether should you take away a victim of sex trafficking's phone. It might be the only way that you can get a hold of her. But, if you take it away from her, then you've got that good evidence, and the pimps won't be able to contact her anymore either, right? She won't be able to she won't have her customers' phone numbers, but you won't be able to get in touch with her either. So these software like Celebrate allow them to just copy the whole phone onto a thing. And then they have a little program that lets them go in and they can click and look at your Facebook and click and look at your messages and search for different things that they might want to see on your phone. One of the more disturbing companies is called CellHawk. And this is a company that works with data dumps from cell phone towers. This company allows you to watch up to 20 phones at a time. officers can look at text messages that were sent. They can play back phone calls, and the software even allows them to put 20 different phones on a map and watch them move to see how they move in relation to each other. Like, this is really scary stuff. And I think that it's, you know, definitely affecting sex workers a lot, but I think if the general public knew what was going on, most people would not be comfortable with that as well. In addition to the technology, we, you know, went through the prostitution arrest reports. Oh, I also, when we were looking at the databases, I wanted to know, you know, is Spotlight and Traffic Jam, are they actually rescuing the kids? Is it working? So we got all of the federal charging documents, and we tried to get all the state charging documents. We got them from several counties, but not all counties. And in almost every case, the victims were found they picked up the phone and called 911 because they wanted help, or else their family, their parents did, somebody who worked in child services. These cases were almost always found by report and not through this software. There were 2 times where people were found through this software. In both of those cases, it was not the police that found them. It was the National Center for Missing and Exploited Children found them and then called the police and said, you know, we found a missing child on the website. Here's how, you know, here's where they are. And they sent over all of the information. So these really invasive databases, especially like Traffic Jam, is still using Amazon's recognition, which is such a racist and horrible program that Amazon actually stopped allowing police departments to use it, but they still allow Traffic Jam to use it. They do not seem to actually in California be contributing to the rescue of any minor sex trafficking victims. When we looked at the prostitution cases, Los Angeles was the only county that provided us with the race of all of the people. They were insanely disproportionately Black and Hispanic. When we looked at the trafficking or the pimping and pandering cases as well, they also were disproportionately Black. We requested from public defenders filings that they might have made under the Racial Justice Act, which California has a new thing to help with prevent racism in policing. In one case, a public defender, you know, found that for that entire county, her entire office, every single person who had been charged with pimping or pandering, except for one, was Black, and that one who wasn't Black was Hispanic. So these are very racist laws. These are very racist technologies here in the US. Unlike in other countries, our facial recognition software is way more likely to make a false positive identification for African American faces than for white faces. And then the racism kind of spills over into the immigration issues, right? Where now we have sex trafficking and prostitution have become so conflated in the public mind that we have Homeland Security as a matter of national security is going out and doing just regular old prostitution stings on customers, right? And I think hopefully most people know that ICE is part of the Department of Homeland Security. So it's ICE that's going into these massage parlors and doing prostitution stings and then deporting the workers. It's ICE that are doing, you know, prostitution stings of customers, which how are you going to find sex trafficking when you're doing stings on customers, but they say it's to end the demand for sex trafficking, right? Because that's part of national security too. And we found in some cases where, you know, they are deporting customers who've been arrested. We also found several cases where the charging documents say that the police officers had sex or engaged in sex with the people that they arrested. And then also we I'm like, where's the list? Where's the list that they're putting us on? And I learned about something called the Suspicious Activity Reporting Initiative, which is a federal database. It's that was created after 9/11 to track terrorism and also suspicious activities between police departments and different kinds of agencies. So they do, they work with airports, banks, schools, and police departments all report to the Suspicious Activity Reporting Initiative. We made a request from the center in California to see how many reports they had, well, to get the reports that involved sex work. They responded that they had thousands, and it would take them months to get them to us. So, we shortened the time period of our request a little bit. They were supposed to get them to us a couple months ago, and then they extended by a month, and then they extended by another month. So all we know is that there are thousands of reports involving sex work, and we don't have any of the details yet. But it seems like we're on the list, and we don't know if our customers are on the list or just sex workers. And I'm going to pass it off to Peyton.
Thank you so much, Tara. Hi, great to meet you all. My name is Peyton McNiff, pronouns she, her, hers. I am a digital designer and a political strategist, and I really appreciated working on this project with this team. I'm going to share my screen here. All right, great. So this full report can be viewed at caforprivacy.org. I'll put that link in the chat shortly here. And I'm just going to do a quick run through of what features and functionalities are available on this website. So right here, you'll see we have the link to the full report, so you can download that and read it. And we can also scroll down for searchable records by county. So we have a map here that shows who got us partial records or no records whatsoever. As you can see, many counties did not provide any records whatsoever. For an example of counties that did, we can go ahead and click on Kern County, provided 11 surveillance equipment records. And if we scroll through, we can see all of the technologies that are used overall, as well as the specific technological subscriptions by department, as well as finally citation and arrest statistics by department. And at the very bottom, you can search as well as view the full report, view the appendix with county fact sheets, and just view a little bit more about ESPLER as an organization and why we did this project. So with that, I will pass it off.
I'm an attorney. I'm located in San Francisco. I've worked with the adult entertainment industry for almost my entire legal career, which is like 30 years. And I've worked with ESPLER specifically over the last maybe 10 years. And I participated in this project by helping with some of the records requests. I'm here to talk about something else, but I'm going to make a little pit stop to talk about the records requests. We've talked about a lot of law enforcement agencies did not respond to our requests. And there's really two reasons for this. One is law enforcement is given a great deal of deference within the Public Records Act. And there are a lot of exceptions for law enforcement. And so one thing is, if they are trying to avoid giving documents, they use these various exceptions, sometimes legally and sometimes just by obfuscating and just kind of using them as an excuse. So in that regard, there really needs to be, we should consider at the legislative level some better guidance to law enforcement as to how these exceptions apply and how they don't, maybe tighten up some of those exceptions. And then, the other thing is your ability to hold them accountable means that you have to have the money to bring a lawsuit, and without knowing what your chances are. And it's just, it's difficult. So part of the recommendations, I believe, are to revisit some of those issues, and I fully support that. But what I was assigned to talk about today was California's Electronic Communications Privacy Act, often called Cal-ECPA. In 2015, Governor Jerry Brown signed SB 178, which is the Cal-ECPA Act. The bill was introduced by California State Senators Mark Leno, who many of you know from San Francisco, who is very liberal, and Joel Anderson, who's a Republican from Alpine County. So it was jointly introduced. It was supported by the Electronic Frontier Foundation, ACLU of Northern California, California Newspaper Publishers Association, and a wide array of other civil rights groups and technology companies. 2/3 of the California legislature supported the bill. So the reason I mention this is that the bill really reflects the will of the California citizens. I can't think of another bill that has had more support. So what does Cal-ECPA do? Through your personal experiences and from watching movies and television, you probably know that law enforcement generally requires a warrant before they can enter your home. And that's because our homes are our sanctuaries. They're deeply personal to us. There are exceptions, but they're somewhat limited. So what Cal-ECPA really did was to recognize that our digital information, the information on our phones, the information about how we are tracked in many different ways through technology, is also deeply personal. And so in a nutshell, what Cal-ECPA did was to require a warrant for the law enforcement to access that kind of information. When it was signed into law, the EFF reported it like this: Californians can rest assured that law enforcement can't poke around in their digital records without first obtaining a warrant. And Senator Leno said, for far too long, California's digital privacy laws have been stuck in the dark ages, leaving our personal emails, text messages, photos, and smartphones increasingly vulnerable to warrantless searches. That ends today with the governor's signature on Cal-ECPA, a carefully crafted law that protects personal information for all Californians. The bill also ensures that law enforcement officials have the tools they need to continue to fight crime in the digital age. And then one more quote from the other co-sponsor of the bill, Joel Anderson, the Republican. He said, Senator Leno and I helped bridge the gap between progressives and conservatives to make the privacy of Californians a top priority this year. This bipartisan bill protects California's basic civil liberties as the Fourth Amendment and California Constitution intended. Well, that didn't quite turn out to be true. And this report really demonstrates that law enforcement is in many cases violating the act outright, and in all cases violating the spirit of the act. They are, as some folks already talked about, using pressure to gain access to people's telephones when they know very well that they are required to have a warrant to look at that information. So you can be rest assured that if this is happening with the groups of people that our work is specifically concerned about and focused on, it's happening or going to happen with all Californians. And so everyone, not just people who are interested in the rights of sex workers, need to pay attention to this and take it very seriously. It's scary stuff. So that's all I was going to mention today, but I'll be around for question and answer later if you need me.
Okay, well, my name is Starchild. I'm a longtime companion, that is to say sex worker, and also a freedom activist in the Libertarian Party. I'm chair of the Libertarian Party of San Francisco and a former elected representative on the Libertarian National Committee. And I just wanted to get into a few of the recommended specific policy solutions that we in ESPLER are suggesting in response to these findings. Maxine and I think Jeffrey, if he's on the line, I can't see who's on the Zoom call, will be outlining some of these as well.
He is.
Problems in the report are sprawling and complex, but we believe there's some simple solutions that would go a long way towards addressing them if we can get them legislatively accomplished. One important change would be banning commercial surveillance. The Federal Trade Commission defines commercial surveillance as, quote, the business of collecting, analyzing, and profiting from information about people, unquote. And that would need to be carefully tailored so that we don't inadvertently criminalize things that are consensual, but this mass surveillance is being conducted in a way that's essentially fraudulent. People don't know how their information is being used, they haven't consented, and they aren't given any of the profits from it. This includes companies that sell your information to police or advertisers, as well as companies that sell information about individuals online to whoever wants to pay for it. The United States is obviously a world leader in technology, but is lagging behind in terms of protections against this kind of surveillance. Another law we really need is regulation of police databases. Oversight and regulation are needed to redirect police towards actually solving crimes against people, you know, crimes that have actual victims like murder, assault, rape, theft, etc., rather than going after sex workers and harvesting people's information basically into their databases. There's information that was turned up in these Freedom of Information Act requests about sex workers being forced to disrobe for photos of all their tattoos, etc., and building databases of sex workers. Tara mentioned the facial recognition technology, and in some cases, more specifically, things like databases of transgender people. In Texas, the Attorney General recently tried to get information on anyone who had tried to file for change in gender identity, you know, in a state where there's unfortunately a lot of anti-trans stuff coming down the pike from politicians. And when databases are used, care needs to be taken that police agencies don't blur definitions, as with the Suspicious Activity Reporting Initiative, and that Tara also mentioned, and the FBI's definition of gang members, which has been an issue locally here in San Francisco, where I live as well, where they were classifying people as gang members and restricting them from being in certain areas or associating with certain people without the persons ever having been charged with crimes. Third, we would like to see laws protecting sex workers and our clients' identities from being published by police, prosecutors, and courts in newspapers and online, and this kind of thing in ways that aren't, you know, that go above and beyond the normal exposure that you know, someone's arrest gets. I mean, arrests are a matter of public record, but sex workers have been specifically targeted in ways that other people arrested for other types of so-called offenses are not. And this can subject sex workers to discrimination in housing, employment, et cetera, sometimes even violence, you know, when this information is released in that kind of manner to the public, especially when there's not context and you don't hear, you know, the other person's side of the story or what happened. Fourth, we need accountability and integrity laws to stop this trend of government agencies in collusion with anti-sex and religious rights lobbies between consensual prostitution among adults and things like underage prostitution, human trafficking, or even terrorism. After the events of September 11th, 2001, government-generated reports identified lack of communication between law enforcement agencies and lack of identification of those engaging in non-criminal suspicious activity. as something they needed to address, and then they came up with a suspicious activity reporting initiative. And each state now has a fusion center, the so-called, which serves as a clearinghouse for reports about, quote, observed behavior reasonably indicative of pre-operational planning associated with terrorism or other criminal activity, unquote. And records requests turned up that specific terms related to sex work were found in this database about supposed terrorism and other criminal activity. The California State Threat Assessment Center invoked 2 extensions in response to our request and has not yet provided the requested data. Supposedly they're going to be providing that today, but we will see what that turns up. With that, I will turn over to Jeffrey, who will talk about several of the other policy proposals that we would like to see enacted.
Thank you, Starchild, and Jeffrey Kwong of the Harvey Milk LGBTQ Democratic Club. It's really a multi-partisan effort, and all of us are concerned about privacy, and we're going to go through some more of these recommendations. And recommendation 5 is making sure our legal code catches up with so many of these concerns that we've brought up. So whether it's the Public Records Act, Electronic Communications Privacy Act, Racial Justice Act, Evidentiary Code, all these aspects that govern civil and criminal code violations, especially holding our public authorities and agencies and personnel that violate privacy. A lot of these concerns that we've raised, making sure that our laws extend to cover these consequences and these concerns that we have raised. 6, we need accountability. So police engaging in sex acts as an investigatory tactic should be criminalized. And we need our policymakers to take a strong leadership role in drawing this line and saying it's not okay, it is criminal, and our law needs to reflect that. Our DAs need to go after them. We need to hold our law enforcement officers accountable for their actions. 7, we need to have a mechanism for individuals to be notified by police, by law enforcement about their data. And that includes photos, how they're being stored, how they're being used, who can access them. And this will be increasingly important as concerns as we have AI, other technologies that come into play, about how our law enforcement officers will use these technologies in order to violate our own privacy. And 8, and police who steal sex workers' photos in order to catfish and arrest clients should be held accountable. No one should use erotic photos without permission. And when the government does so under the guise of law enforcement activities, of rescues, of other activities, it is particularly reprehensible. It contributes directly to public distrust, harassment, and of course, violation of our privacy. And with that, I'm going to turn it over for final policy recommendations. Maxine?
Thank you, everybody. Thanks for doing such a fabulous job of talking about the many, many issues that we have going on here. So be sure to check out our website, which is ca4privacy.org. You can certainly put your questions in the Q&A and we'll get to them in my concluding remarks here. There has to be some consequences for law enforcement agencies that do not comply with the Public Records Request Act, the Californians Electronic Communication Privacy Act, and the Racial Justice Act. Of course, we want to see the repeal of 647B, the solicitation of prostitution law, the loitering with intent to commit prostitution 65322 was just repealed as of the beginning of this year because it was being used on people of color and trans women. And, one of the things we were not able to do in this report because of the lack of responses from the law enforcement agencies is to ascertain the amount of monies that were being spent on these technologies. And, we would just like to say that we would like to see these monies that are being spent on the technologies to violate our constitutional and our human rights in these prostitution sting operations under the guise of rescuing us, and all the technology that's being used for that purpose, to instead be used to provide accurate and timely public records requests. Many of the public records people I spoke to expressed frustration that they did not have the technologies within their own departments to be able to do, basic data searches. So, we would like to see, that money that's being used to violate our constitutional and human rights to instead make these law enforcement agencies more accountable to the public, because we have to have that. We have to have that transparency. We have to have that mechanism of accountability. It's a serious public safety issue to have access to these records and to hold these law enforcement agencies and the public who fund them accountable. And finally, the Attorney General should suspend the enforcement of 647B and make sure that the police are primarily complying with all of these laws that they are in violation of as a priority, instead of arresting adults for prostitution. So, having expressed those concerns, we can go and take some questions that are in the chat. So there's a question here. I'm thinking maybe Tara can answer this one. It says, this is a fascinating and disturbing information. Do you have a sense of what basis is given for adding a person to one of these databases? For instance, do the admins of these databases claim that everyone in the database is suspected of committing a crime? Yeah, Tara, can you address that?
Yeah, so no, these are databases that crawl the web. And if you are, there's different databases, right? So like Traffic Jam and Spotlight, right? If you are advertising on a prostitution site, or if your face appears on a prostitution site, you're on that website or you're in that database. Other databases like Clear, TLORX, if you exist on the internet, you are in the database. Or if you have a credit report even, these are databases that just have all of the information they can get about everybody, and they have their computers compile the things, and even they can even look up like, oh, well, who are these persons, Facebook friends, who are they connected to? And they compile and store all of this data that, even if you've deleted your Facebook account, it's still in this database, right? And the police 10 years from now can still look you up in the database and say, oh, there's, a Google review that they posted on the internet 10 years ago that shows that they, went to this store, they were in this area, they were interested in this topic or something like that. So yeah, everybody is in these databases. Now there are other databases, like for example, the FBI keeps a gang member database, and we don't know, the definition of a gang member is very confusing. It's three or more people involved around or involved with each other around a criminal activity, which seems like a definition that would include sex worker activists or anybody who does any kind of law, constitutionally protected legal reform advocacy. And we don't know, we have to do more public records requests. And I think we'll probably end up with another report about the federal aspect of all of this.
Great, thank you for that, Tara. So here's a question. Do we know if San Francisco Police Department and the San Francisco District Attorney's Office are using these databases? That is a great question. And I just am smiling and trying to refrain from laughing because they were one of the agencies that did not respond to our public records request. In fact, it was only this morning that I received a response from the San Francisco Police Department noting that it's been 6.5 months since I sent in the last public records request to them. So they are responding 6.5 months later. And their response to me was that, oops, my public records request got sent to the media department and they're going to forward it on to the legal department for a response. So that is what came from the San Francisco Police Department. As far as the district attorney's office, they did respond to me with a link to a dashboard of some type of database that they provide to the public, where I was allowed to search for the 647B and the 65322 cases, of which over our time period, which was from January 1st, 2020 through February 28th, 2022, I wasn't able to identify more than a couple of cases, but that database was very confusing. I had difficulty navigating it. Granted, I'm not the most technology inclined person. So if an average person like me cannot navigate those databases, and it's the labor is put on us to search your janky databases to try to find the answers to our questions, then you have misspent some public monies on that janky database. And you should properly respond to our public records request.
Maxine, this is Starchild. I just wanted to mention that the San Francisco Police Commission actually has a meeting happening tomorrow at 5:30 p.m., which you can participate in virtually as well. If you're so inclined, I would encourage any members of the press, whoever asked the question or anybody else interested, to perhaps attend the Police Commission meeting and ask them publicly there, and might get some of the commissioners perhaps interested in it as well. Find out if the police are using these databases in San Francisco.
Great, thanks for that, Starchild. So we have another question. Thank you for doing this report. Today, the Rhode Island Senate Bill 0396 has a hearing related to Criminal Procedure, Electronic Information and Data Privacy Act. It basically gives them more power to search electronics with the permission that they will get a warrant. However, if they claim you are a sex worker, then all bets are off. So this person says they were able to draft a fabulous letter in opposition of this legislation at their state level, citing our new report. So good job, everybody, for all the good work that has gone on there. Any other concluding thoughts or comments the panelists wish to make?
This is Starchild again. I'd just like to thank everyone who put the time in on making all these records requests and following up. And I know that's a big ongoing burden. Government is just so huge and so out of control, and there's so little accountability and oversight as a result that just trying to find out what's going on is a huge burden, as I think anyone listening to this press conference today has gotten an inkling, if you weren't already aware of it, just how many different agencies are involved, exactly what they're doing, what kinds of surveillance they're engaged in. All of this is just one of the reasons I'm a libertarian and encourage people to vote libertarian and try to get some of this under control. It's all our stolen tax money that's paying for all this.
I would just say one last thing though. Let's let everyone know how they can access the report. So currently the full report is linked on the ESPLER site, but let's get that linked to the California for Privacy one as well. And we also have, it's a very lengthy and in-depth report. If you don't have that much time, there's also an executive summary. And then shortly, everyone who is on here because they received a media advisory will also be sent a press release that will include links to the executive summary as well as the full report.
Okay.
And then just to follow up on that, Andre, some people had asked whether a recording of this presentation is going to be available. Have we gotten, will that link also be available in those same communications?
Yes, it will. This is being recorded, and basically if they registered, they will gain access to this. We'll also take it off the cloud of Zoom here and post it on our YouTube channel, which is Sex Worker Nation. So be sure to check out our YouTube channel, subscribe to it on YouTube, Sex Worker Nation, where we post all of our public facing education.
And just for clarity on that, there were some questions and answers where people's names were appeared. I assume that this is only the video of the speakers and not those questions and answers.
That's correct.
Great. Just wanted to make sure everybody felt comfortable. Since we are talking about, the surveillance state. All right, well, I'm signing off. Thank you. I hope you all make good use of this report, and we look forward to seeing legislative changes in the future.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you all so much.